The Moscow and Ryazan oil refineries, all the good drones, caused a stir in Russia. Putin crawled in to beg for support. Right after Trump, the bunker dweller arrived in China. The front will become even wider. Syrskyi announced a real threat from Belarus.
A possible operation in the north is real. We know this data. The Russian General Staff is now actively calculating and planning operations, offensive actions.
There can never be too many attacks on Russia. Zelensky revealed long-range plans for June.
Zelensky stated that there will be many explosions in Russia in June. He approved Ukraine's long-range plans for the next month. This means that even more military facilities, depots, and airfields on Russian territory will come under fire.
Iran has only a couple of days to reconsider. Trump hints at new strikes. He
stated that Iran has only 2 or 3 days to come to the negotiating table.
For the first time, there is an alert in Lithuania. Previously, it had already sounded in Latvia and Estonia. A drone was spotted in Latvian airspace. Putin has finally joined the party. Cooperation between the US and China. Could Russia really become the third?
Moreover, we are ready to cooperate with everyone, including our partners around the world, including the United States.
Once again, it didn't work out. Once again, Russia failed to reach an agreement with China on Power of Siberia 2.
There are still some details left to agree on, but overall, such an understanding already exists. Have any timeframes started to take shape? What? The Siberia 2 settlement project. There isn't anything definite yet, since after all, this is commercial information, but it's quite a significant achievement.
Now that's news. For the first time, the State Duma has called to end the special military operation. So where did Putin's talking points go?
It is absolutely clear that the economy will not withstand a prolonged continuation of the special military operation.
These and other topics right now. Greetings, I am Volodymyr Robchun, and you are on the Ukraine Today channel. Please subscribe, leave a like, and let's move on to the news. Strikes on Lukoil's oil refinery, Nizhny Novgorod Orgsyntez, and other facilities in Russia. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, a primary oil processing unit was damaged in Kstovo. At the Yaroslavl 3 oil pumping station, the tank farm was hit. Defense forces also successfully struck enemy command posts and ammunition depots in Russia and in the temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and Luhansk. Ukraine is moving to a new level in the technology war. Its own guided aerial bomb, new long-range missiles, and joint projects with Europe. The Ukrainian defense sector is rapidly expanding its capabilities. Next, about how the war is forcing Ukraine to become one of the strongest producers of modern weaponry.
Ukraine has created its own guided aerial bomb, and this is no longer just an experiment or a project on paper. According to Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, the bomb has passed all necessary tests and is ready for combat use. The development took 17 months of work by Ukrainian engineers. The project was implemented with the support of the Brave One platform, a government initiative focused on the development of military technologies. The main thing is that this is a completely Ukrainian development. It is not a copy of a Western or Russian weapon, but a system created for the realities of modern warfare.
An ordinary bomb, even when dropped from the maximum altitude of 10 to 12 kilometers from a high-speed aircraft. Here, the range is already significantly greater, several times higher. And that's why such bombs, Russia constantly uses them on the front line. In fact, without strikes from such bombs, here are the Russian local assaults, when infantry is simply thrown at Ukrainian fortifications. However many are killed, that's how many are killed. Each time, sometimes during the most intense assault days, up to 150 of these bombs are dropped.
The new Ukrainian UAV is capable of striking fortifications, command posts, and other targets tens of kilometers deep. In other words, this is yet another tool for precision strikes against the enemy without requiring aircraft to directly enter dangerous zones. The Ministry of Defense has already purchased the first batch of new aerial bombs. And this means that the development is moving into the practical phase and may appear at the front in the near future.
In principle, it allows for the destruction of any field fortifications. And these capabilities will be used to systematically dismantle and eliminate enemy command posts, as well as to destroy critical ammunition storage depots and supply hubs. This will provide a vital and significant strategic advantage to our ground forces as they work on repelling Russian assaults or during our own counterattacks to utilize a similar tactic, launching precision strikes against heavily fortified Russian positions. After that, our unmanned systems forces eliminate any survivors with drones, and the assault group captures these positions.
But Ukraine is not stopping there. At the same time, work is underway on new long-range missiles. The European company Destinus, together with the German concern Rheinmetall, is developing the Ruta Block 3 system, a missile with a range of up to 2,000 kilometers.
The new missile will have a warhead weighing 250 kilograms and a modern navigation system that will allow it to operate even under GPS signal jamming conditions. This is important in modern warfare, where electronic warfare systems have become one of the key factors. Its tests are to be conducted specifically in Ukraine. According to the plan, the first flight tests will begin in 2027.
The project is being developed simultaneously in several countries. Destinus's main engineering center is already operating in the Netherlands. Germany will be responsible for serial production and certification, and Ukraine will be responsible for testing, combat adaptation, and the production of certain key components.
Approximately 70% of all Russian military enterprises, specifically within the Russian military-industrial complex, will soon be within the direct striking range of our advanced weaponry. That means we will be able to effectively and systematically destroy not only strategic military facilities in the border regions and in Crimea, but also reach deep-seated targets located well beyond the Ural Mountains region.
Just a few years ago, Ukraine's defense sector mainly depended on old Soviet designs. Today, however, the country is creating its own high-tech solutions, from FPV drones and naval unmanned vehicles to aerial bombs and missiles.
There are a lot of components from Western companies. At this point, we practically have no restrictions on access to high technologies produced in the West. We can use both radio electronic components and individual modules in our weapon systems.
Ukrainian weapons are starting to attract the attention not only of the military, but also of international partners, since a significant portion of these systems has already been tested in real combat conditions. In this way, Ukraine is gradually becoming one of the key producers of modern weaponry in Europe.
In the past 24 hours, Russia has lost at least 920 invaders, killed and wounded. Thus, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, this amounts to 1,352,070 occupiers. In addition, over the past 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 2 armored combat vehicles, 60 artillery systems, and dozens more pieces of other Russian military equipment. At the end of 2025, China secretly trained about 200 Russian military personnel for the war against Ukraine, according to Reuters. According to the agency, in July of last year, China and Russia signed an agreement that provided for the training of occupiers at bases in Beijing and Nanjing, which is exactly what happened. Most of them were instructors who were trained to work with drones, electronic warfare, and army aviation. Some of them could later have been sent to the war. Now is the perfect time to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it. Please do it right now. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. Russians are dissatisfied with Putin's regime. This is evidenced by the results of a study by the All-Russian Center for the Study of Public Opinion. They recorded the highest level of public outrage in 8 years, caused by the Kremlin's domestic, foreign, and economic policies. Next, let's talk about what happens when hopes for a quick end to the war don't come true: blocked internet and lack of money.
Russian society is showing the most significant increase in dissatisfaction with the authorities in recent years, and it's not opposition activists recording this, but state sociologists. I
do not support this. There's no reason to waste money. Take care of your own country. It's so rich. Shut yourselves off and get to work.
And where do you think the country is headed?
Oh, that's a difficult question. For now, it's kind of, I don't even know how to put it. Let's put it this way. It's heading in the wrong direction. A good free Russia. According
to Zoom data, by the end of April, the share of Russians who are generally dissatisfied with the country's domestic policy had risen to 36%. Back in December, that number was 22%.
The country is currently enduring devastating defeats across all of its major fronts.
I don't know how to put it. Probably Russia is doing something wrong.
In 4 months, the increase was 14 percentage points. This is a record dynamic since 2018, when the Kremlin carried out the extremely unpopular pension reform. And for the first time since the start of the full-scale war, the number of dissatisfied people has exceeded the number of those who are satisfied with the authorities' policies.
I'm just amazed. How is it possible? How long can they keep stealing abroad? All of them, our deputies in the State Duma. Just look, they're buying these castles for themselves for 300 million euros. And if it weren't for my children, honestly, I would have starved to death.
Moreover, it's no longer just about some isolated irritant, but about a systemic accumulation of fatigue across several areas at once. Dissatisfaction with Russia's foreign policy, according to the same VT Zyom data, has risen from 16% to 26%, reaching its highest level since available statistics began in 2007. But the most painful issue remains the economy. Almost half of those surveyed, 46%, said they are dissatisfied with the government's economic policy. Last winter, this figure was 31%.
So as it actually turns out in the end,
that the rate of growth in economic discontent is now comparable to society's reaction to the increase in the retirement age. One of the most difficult political decisions for the Kremlin in recent decades. Sociologists link these sentiments primarily to the protracted war and the sense of complete uncertainty about the future. Sociologist Oleg Zhuravlev notes that just a year ago, many Russians were counting on a quick end to the conflict. There were expectations in Russian society that Donald Trump, who promised to achieve an end to the war, would be able to influence the situation. But the war goes on, the economy remains under pressure, new taxes are being introduced, and inflation is gradually shifting from something seen on TV to something reflected in the contents of an ordinary grocery receipt.
Previously, the threat seemed unattainable, distant. Now it has become frightening. Yes.
Now this is reality. And suddenly things might get even worse. It's very scary.
Now.
If in the spring of 2014, after the annexation of Crimea, Russian society was in a state of almost universal euphoria, now, according to Zhuravlev, even many supporters of the war no longer feel any enthusiasm, but rather fatigue and irritation.
It seems like everyone is fed up now, right?
I want to take a moment to dedicate this video not to the fact that people are not being given bunkers, and not to the fact that there is smog hanging in the sky, even though everyone keeps insisting that there is no intoxication and that everything is supposedly within normal limits. Instead, I want to focus on just ordinary people, regular folks, just pawns in a much larger game who are quietly suffering and enduring hardships that often go unnoticed or unacknowledged by those in power. Just like you.
At the same time, open discontent has not yet turned into mass protest. Political analysts explain this by the high level of repression and fear within the country. However, even against this backdrop, people's willingness to at least talk about protest sentiments is gradually changing. According to data from the Levada Center, in April, 20% of Russians considered the possibility of mass protests due to a decline in living standards. Another 14% considered political demonstrations likely. Both figures have reached their highest level since July of last year. And although the Russian political system still maintains an outward appearance of stability, sociologists and analysts are increasingly talking about the buildup of internal tension.
3 people were killed as a result of Russian strikes on peaceful Ukrainian cities. Dnipro and Odessa came under attack. The occupiers damaged residential buildings, infrastructure facilities, warehouses, and vehicles. The invaders are attacking Ukraine with radioactive weapons. The Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, discovered a significantly elevated radiation level on the debris of a Russian drone and an R-60 missile after the attack on Chernihiv region in April 1926. The warheads of these aerial weapons contain uranium-235 and uranium-238. The greatest danger comes from damaged munitions, as they can release radioactive dust that is hazardous to people and the environment. Lithuania declared an air raid alert and scrambled its air force. The reason was the threat of UAVs from Belarus, as reported by the country's Ministry of Defense. NATO fighter jets were patrolling the airspace in the Baltic region, and the airport in Vilnius was closed. NATO is capable of leveling all military facilities in the Kaliningrad region in the event of a threat from Russia. This was stated by the head of Lithuania's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kęstutis Budrys. More on the explosive situation in the Baltic region coming up.
Europe is once again warning the Kremlin. Aggression against EU and NATO countries is a very bad idea. And even though Putin continues to see himself as invincible, the alliance can quickly bring him back to reality. And Kaliningrad will be the first to feel it. Neither air defense systems nor the missile complexes that have been crammed into the city will help. We
must show the Russians that we are capable of breaking through their little fortress that they have built in Kaliningrad. If necessary, NATO has the means to level Russian air defense bases and missile bases located there. And
NATO missiles will have plenty of targets to strike. There are especially many military targets along the Baltic Sea coast. Both aviation, communications, troops, and repair plants are concentrated here. But the words of the Lithuanian foreign minister are not just a warning to Russia. They are also a reminder to the Allies. Europe should not underestimate the risks of a potential conflict with Russia.
Europe must demonstrate and present to the Russian Federation comprehensive instruments of strategic deterrence. And when Europe only demonstrates repeated attempts to establish a bilateral dialogue with Putin, instead of, for example, introducing another robust package of sanctions or significantly strengthening Ukraine, then of course this is undoubtedly perceived positively in the Kremlin as a clear sign of Europe's vulnerability and a lack of unified resolve, which can definitely be manipulated and exploited for their own strategic gain.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania also noted that European countries should strengthen their own defense capabilities and take into account that the United States may not come to their aid. Kęstutis Budrys points out that many European plans are based on the assumption that the US will provide Europe with critically important military capabilities, such as satellite reconnaissance. But even now, approaches to security should be reconsidered.
After this resonant statement about the Kaliningrad region, he moves on to more pragmatic and constructive points, saying that if there really is aggression from the Russian Federation towards Europe, the countries of the European Union and NATO, it will affect everyone. And this could potentially happen in the very foreseeable and immediate future. Such an aggressive attack would have a devastating impact on every single member state of the European Union, not just those specific countries that share a direct land border with the territory of the Russian Federation. This again indicates that there are serious concerns in the Baltic countries about whether the United States will fulfill its commitments, their collective defense obligations within NATO, and moreover, how various other European countries will choose to respond to any potential acts of military aggression coming from the Russian Federation.
Despite the fact that Russian aggression is no longer just a hypothetical assumption, Europe is still responding to it very slowly. On May 15th, the Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, Carsten Breuer, stated that Russia could be ready to attack NATO territory as early as 2029. There are also plans for technological superiority, but according to these plans, this should happen by 2035. Europeans continue to think that they have time, even though they say they should already be prepared for an attack by Russia. But in reality, the EU should have been ready for aggression yesterday.
At this very moment, in my personal opinion, extensive and strategic preparations are currently underway for what appears to be a very geographically broad military and political special operation orchestrated by Vladimir Putin and accordingly the entire Russian Federation across multiple regions. And one of its focal points will be, let's say, pressure from the Kaliningrad region on Europe. Publicly, Russia wants control over the Baltic Sea and, accordingly, over the strait that is currently controlled by Denmark and Sweden. And Russia, without a doubt, needs unrestricted access through the Suwałki corridor to that very Kaliningrad region.
The Kremlin is provoking incidents over the Baltic Sea more and more frequently. In mid-May, the Poles detected a Russian Il-20 military aircraft equipped for comprehensive electronic and photographic reconnaissance in the sky over the Baltic Sea. Before that, in April, the French were forced several times to scramble their Rafale fighters to intercept Russian fighter jets. Some of the Russian aircraft were even armed with missiles. Yes, everything ended without aggression. However, who knows what will happen next time?
The Kremlin is hunting the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Kirilo Budanov. Why eliminating the former head of the main intelligence directorate remains an obsession for the Russians, how Budanov reacts to assassination attempts, and what he says about Russian plans. All the details are coming up next.
There is a real manhunt for you.
I like it.
In recent years, he has survived a huge number of assassination attempts. Do you keep count of the assassination attempts against you?
Honestly, I don't even know. That's the honest answer. I don't know the exact number. Definitely more than 10. Frankly, I think it's around 20.
The head of the president's office and one of Ukraine's main negotiators in talks with Russia, Kirilo Budanov, remains one of the Kremlin's primary targets to this day.
Well, of course, he really is probably one of the most significant and primary targets for Russian attacks, due to the simple fact that he embodies, on the one hand, Ukraine's continuous and relentless struggle for independence, the highly effective operations of Ukrainian special services, and, in general, a consistently firm and uncompromising negotiating stance. Budanov,
headed the main intelligence directorate from August 2020 to January 2026. After which he was appointed head of the president's office. During this time, he became one of the main organizers of Ukrainian special operations against Russia. As noted by the Times, Budanov has close ties with the CIA and is considered one of the key figures in Ukraine's security system. Among the well-known assassination attempts, the publication mentions a 2019 incident when a bomb planted by a Russian agent exploded prematurely under Budanov's car. And in 2024, the Security Service of Ukraine reported a foiled attempt to strike his motorcade with ballistic missiles, also involving Russian agents. And in 2023, according to Ukrainian intelligence services, Budanov's wife Mariana and several intelligence officers were poisoned with heavy metals. Russian intelligence agencies do not stop and continue their attempts to eliminate Kirilo Budanov even during negotiations to end the war.
Budanov is a negotiator of a new generation. Moreover, he is a negotiator who stands out noticeably both from earlier Ukrainian negotiation traditions and from the negotiation traditions of the modern West, where there is a tendency to appease the Russians and the Russian dictator. Budanov is not like that. He is ready to negotiate. He never refuses to negotiate, but he always insists on negotiating from a position of strength, and that is the most important thing. In other words, Budanov is precisely the kind of negotiator who doesn't try to please Putin, but puts pressure on him.
In an interview with the British publication The Times, Budanov stated that he does not find it strange that the Kremlin continues to hunt for him. Moreover, he said that he considers such attempts absolutely normal, given his previous activities as the head of Ukrainian military intelligence.
I don't need to trust anyone. I need to achieve results. And to achieve results, any means, forms, or methods of work are acceptable.
One thing is clear: Budanov definitely won't be left alone, and Russia won't stop at its failed attempts to eliminate him.
Russia understands perfectly well that, just like with Zelensky, they can't put pressure on Budanov. That is, they can exert some pressure, but they can't break them. And that's why, naturally, from the perspective of the Russian imperial idea, with all its hatred toward anyone who stands in its way, of course they would gladly see both Zelensky and Budanov eliminated. Budanov is an exceptionally significant and valuable figure in this regard, since he effectively combines both strategic military responsibilities and the prominent role of a political leader, serving as one of the key representatives of Ukraine's senior leadership. At the same time, he is closely associated with many of the notable recent successes achieved by the various specialized intelligence and security services of Ukraine.
Finally, a word about the American domestic political struggle against the backdrop of foreign policy factors. The US Senate supported a bill to limit Donald Trump's military powers regarding Iran, with 50 votes in favor and 47 against. This became possible because some Republicans, members of Trump's own party, sided with the Democrats. This was reported by American media. The document will require the head of the White House to obtain congressional approval. In other words, no unilateral decisions. But that's only if the initiative is ultimately adopted. It still requires approval in further votes in the Senate and the US House of Representatives. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Strength to Ukraine's defenders, both men and women. Glory to Ukraine. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share this video.